Urban legends tend to be fairly harmless rituals that people perform for a thrill or a challenge. Every now and then, however, there are legends that make a person's life miserable and are sometimes even downright dangerous. Such was the case with the Witch of Parley's Hollow, also referred to as Crazy Mary or Bloody Mary. The term Crazy Mary was used starting at the turn of the century to describe women who didn't fit societal norms. A 1915 Salt Lake Telegram article claimed that Crazy Marys were on the rise and described them as crack-brained, physically weak, wild, and haggard in appearance. It naturally turned into a challenge to see if these people could spot the Witch of Parley's Hollow. The lady was a recluse, and from what stories I could find, she had very eccentric behavior. One lady told a story of going to her house at midnight and watching her wildly playing her piano. It seems as if the goal of this legend was simply to see if you could spot her. Because so little was known about who this woman was, the rumors of her being crazy or a witch began to grow. So who was Crazy Mary, and how did this legend surrounding her grow?
In order to know about this woman, we need to also know about her family.
Back in 1864, where the current Parley's Historic Nature Park is today, sat the Dudler family homestead. The family included Joseph Dudler, his wife Elizabeth, who went by her middle name of Susan, and their 7 children. Joseph was a carpenter by trade with a talent for brewing beer. He built a 2-story home with a stone foundation and framed upper floor. By 1870, Joseph had extended the house into the hillside behind it, which included a brewery. The lower floor contained a stone wine cellar that served to keep things cool. This cellar, along with pieces of the original foundation, can still be seen today. Mr. Dudler's beer business quickly took off, and by 1892, he owned 1 or 2 saloons in Salt Lake City, as well as the Philadelphia Brewery Saloon in Park City. The homestead was also used as an inn for travelers passing through Parley's Canyon, and by the early 1900s, it too was used as a saloon. Joseph Dudler died suddenly on the 21st of October, 1897. The responsibility of running the brewery and maintaining Dudler's Inn fell on his wife and children. It seems that they were a feisty bunch and were definitely up to the challenge. In 1898, the Salt Lake County Sheriff arrived at the property in the middle of the night in order to shut off access to a canal the Dudlers had built to supply their brewery and crops with water. Mrs. Dudler was not having it, and along with her sons and her daughter Loreta, kept the canal open, and the sheriff left embarrassed. It turned into a major legal battle, with Susan Dudler being sued by Salt Lake City for taking water to which she was not entitled. The city even went so far as to erroneously claim that the water was unhealthy and not suitable for human consumption. Mrs. Dudler repelled the suit successfully and was able to maintain her claim to water rights of the canal. Just a few years later, on December 26, 1904, Susan Dudler succumbed to pneumonia and died at the family homestead. Joseph and Susan Dudler had 3 daughters, Amelia, Louisa, and Loreta. Louisa was the only one who appears to have had a normal life. She got married, moved away from Parley's Hollow, and started a family of her own. Amelia Dudler was a popular girl in her teenage years. She, along with Loreta, spent a lot of time in Park City, both attending St. Mary's Academy. Loreta was an accomplished musician and won awards for both her skill at playing the piano and organ and her beautiful singing voice. Amelia Dudler got married and eventually became addicted to morphine and cocaine. Most of her adult life was spent in and out of jail and prison. She was frequently mentioned in the newspaper for various fights to which she had been a party, as well as arrests for drug use and disturbing the peace. In 1906, she was even a suspect in a murder case. She died on October 30th, 1907. The death certificate lists her death as natural and specifically states that, quote, she was a morphine and cocaine fiend. And then there was Loreta. Loreta, who also went by simply Retta, moved back to the homestead after she finished school. Starting when she was 16, she began suffering from anxiety and severe depressive episodes. She met her husband, Harold Scher, while living in Park City, and they married in July 1907. Harold was a miner by trade, but after marrying Loreta, he began work at the family brewery. In May 1908, their first child, Harold, was born. Life at this point seemed to be going pretty well for Loreta. A year later, Loreta lost another loved one when her sister Louisa died at the age of 49. And 3 years after that, on July 26, 1912, her favorite brother Frank died from kidney disease.
An interesting fact is her brother Frank knew and was acquaintances with Jacob Moritz, who is better known in local lore as Emo, a topic I'll be covering on a future episode.
In a span of just a few years, she lost her mother and 3 siblings. This would have been hard for anyone, but in Loreta's case, it was compounded by her depression and anxiety. In March 1911, Loreta and Harold's second son, Charles, was born, but things were not going to stay relatively normal for Loreta for much longer. On October 18, 1912, Charles Scher died at the age of 19 months from convulsions at the Dudler homestead. Loreta was devastated, and from all accounts, she was never the same after his death. By 1930, Loreta's husband had moved to Los Angeles, leaving Loreta and Harold Jr. at Parley's Hollow. By this point, Harold Jr. was 21 years old. He had inherited his mother's musical abilities, and his profession was listed as a musician. In February 1933, Harold Jr. was married and moved to California, where he worked as a studio musician for Paramount Pictures for many years. Loreta was now living alone at Parley's Hollow. This is when the legend of the Witch of Parley's Hollow got its start. Loreta didn't leave the house much, and no one really came to visit her. By 1940, the house was in severe disrepair, which only helped the rumors that surrounded her to grow. I'm sure many of the local people remembered the stories of her drug-addicted sister and the family's fight with the city over water. Many of the local people at that time did not believe the Dudlers had any right to the water they were taking. Parents would warn their children not to go near her house, and the talk amongst the kids was that this strange lady was a witch. By the mid-1940s, Loreta was living in a nursing home near 2nd North and 5th West. Her house sat abandoned, and her son left all of the antique furniture, including Loreta's beloved piano, inside. On the evening of October 18, 1952, the 40th anniversary of her son's death, Loreta's house went up in flames. The fire was determined to have been caused by vandals. In the years it sat empty, the house of legend had turned into a party spot for local teens. The house wasn't completely destroyed, but all of the antique furniture, including the piano, was a loss. The house was now more derelict and creepy than ever. Early in the morning of March 22, 1959, an elderly woman who had lived a long yet difficult life died at the nursing home in which she had been living for years. Her siblings and estranged husband had all died before her, and her only living son lived in Las Vegas. Loreta Dudler Scher lived to be 88 years old. Her obituary was very simple, and she is buried in an unmarked grave in the Salt Lake City Cemetery. Was she estranged from her son as well? It seems so, but has been impossible to fully determine given what little information is available so far. In 1963, Salt Lake County set the Dudler house on fire and demolished it. They needed the land for the new freeway that was going in. If you ever get a chance to visit the Parley's Historic Nature Park, walk over to the old Dudler wine cellar and pay your respects to a terribly misunderstood woman.
And that's the real story about the Witch of Parley's Hollow. Thank you so much for listening. If you like this story, you know what to do with it. As always, my name is Jennifer Jones. See you next time.